Now, Michela Wrong spent nearly 2 decades reporting on Africa. Based as a correspondent in Côte d'Ivoire and the Democratic Republic of Congo, she covered the turbulent events of the mid-90s. Her experience, of course, makes her the perfect person to write a novel, and naturally, she's here to talk to us about her latest book, Borderlines. It's about a British lawyer who's mourning a lost love, and to forget that, she takes on a job in Africa, taking testimony from people at refugee camps as part of a border arbitration case. But I'm going to stop right there and welcome the esteemed Michela Wrong. Thank you so much for your time. You know, lots of people can summarize your book and give reviews. Tell me, what's it about?
I think that was a good start. I mean, it's basically about this young female lawyer who goes out and tries to help this, I call it North Daraa, but many people will see parallels with existing countries. There's this weird situation where they have to prove where their border lies, and they have to do that in The Hague. And everyone's gone to arbitration. They've been in a war with their nearest neighbour. And it all ends up being decided by lawyers. And I thought that was a very interesting situation. And she goes out there, and of course, in the process of trying to do her job, ends up understanding a lot more about the complexities of the place. And also begins to understand why people are leaving that country and trying to get out, and ends up becoming very implicated in this flood of refugees who are leaving the country.
Yeah. Now, given that you have so much experience in Africa, it really does show that you're able to describe African countries unlike many other foreigners. And that, of course, would kind of cross the line of the book being entirely fictitious.
Yes, I mean, it's obviously based on things that happened to me. In many cases, it's based on things that happened to friends of mine. And the part of Africa she goes to, some people will see parallels, echoes of Eritrea and Ethiopia, those kind of countries. And those are places I visited very often, because my second book was about Eritrea. So the smell of the place, the feel of the place, and the issues and how expatriates in particular react to those kind of countries when they're trying to understand what's going on.
So how much of it is actually your experience as a foreigner in, Africa?
It's a mix. I'm not a lawyer. I'm a journalist. And I had to pretend to be a lawyer. I had to sort of gem up on the law. There were lots of things I didn't really understand. But I think one of the issues that turns out to have been very relevant today is that, why do people flee the Horn of Africa at the moment? And that's something that I've been very concerned about, watching very closely. So many people I know have been caught up in that. So that was something I wanted to be in the book. Now,
you've written 3 non-fiction novels before, or books before. What inspired your decision to actually make this change?
I think it's about reaching a different audience. I know who my non-fiction audience is, and it's a great audience. It's a very smart audience. It's an African audience. It's also a diaspora audience, and it's also a Western audience. Lots of policymakers, NGO people like my books. But I wanted to see if I could reach beyond that audience, include that audience, but then reach ordinary people who would never read a non-fiction book about Africa. And that's a very large group, so I'm trying to reach them.
Yeah. Now, you are here, and it would be very wrong of me not to ask you a question like this. Because you've done extensive coverage in Africa in the 90s, what do you think now, in this day and age, when you hear that they're still, fighting in the Democratic Republic of Congo? How do you feel seeing that? A country has come a long way, but not quite yet.
I think what's happening in Congo is very worrying. I'm also very worried. My third book, my last book, was about Kenya, and it was a non-fiction book about current modern-day Kenya. And I'm very worried about the rising ethnic rivalry and hostility you see there. So I think, we see Africa rising. Everyone's been talking about Africa rising, but there are very many countries that I am looking at, the ones I know well. I also spent a lot of time in Eritrea, and Eritrea now is pumping out all these people trying to leave. The third biggest group of people who are fleeing the country, migrants now, are Eritreans. And so you've got Africa rising on the one hand, but you have very worrying rise in authoritarianism, presidents who don't want to step down, these third-term issues that keep coming up, and that's all the sort of step backwards, massive step backwards.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much for your insight and speaking to us. Michela Wrong, of course, a journalist and author.